I am Alexus Rhone, and the title of my story is Forgive Them in Advance. I have one hard rule that I live by. It is non-negotiable, and I live it, and then I insist that everyone else live it as well, and it is simply this. For everyone in their 20s, if you know someone in their 20s, this one rule: forgive them in advance. They just don't know what they do. Sometimes people in their 20s will do things, they'll make choices, and you really have no words for them. All you have is just kind of a look, like, is that a thing for real? No words, just a look. I know it if I speak. I was 22 years old, a senior at the University of Texas at Austin, about to graduate, be the first in my family to graduate from college, and there were a ton of hopes, there were dreams, and there was a boy. His name was Barry, and Barry was beautiful. He was tall, he had a very sexy gait, and he looked like a melanated Michael Jackson. I'm talking about the Michael before the Thriller album. It's like he's on the Off the Wall and he has that tuxedo jacket and he just kind of posed like that. That was Barry. Barry was beautiful, and I was in love with him. But Barry had some deficiencies. The first was that although I was 22 years old and I was about to be a college graduate, I was a college senior, 22-year-old college senior. Barry was a 23-year-old college freshman. Okay, it's a deficit. Second thing, Barry lived in Houston, which was about 250 miles from me in Austin. So, it was a deficit. And then the third, although Barry worked a full-time job, he never had enough money to pay for all of his bills. Like, he could cover his lights and his rent every month, no problem. But cable and phone bill, it was always a toss-up between which one of those would be paid. And on the months that money was really tight, he didn't pay for any of them. So it's like cable and phone would be off. But, still I loved Barry. He was handsome, and that was the rule. But not everyone was a fan of Barry's. My friend Ryan, he and I were both students at the University of Texas. He's in Austin. And Ryan one time asked me, he said, Lex, what do you think Barry is doing when you are, you're away in school and he's just kind of out there in Houston on his own? What do you think he's doing while the two of you are apart? And I smiled real sheepishly. And I said, Ryan, it's so interesting that you would ask that question, because I asked Barry the exact same question. And he asked that I not disclose to him what he does. And so I'm going to break that rule, and I'm going to ask you to please not disclose what he does. But this is what Barry says that he does when we are apart. And so I'm real sheepish as I'm telling Ryan this, and I just kind of whisper, he says that he touches himself and thinks about me. And then I just close my eyes, and Ryan is done with questions. He didn't ask any more questions from that point forward about me and Barry's relationship. So I'm good, and I guess he's satisfied with that. But one night, Ryan called me. It was about 8 o'clock that night. Ryan worked for IBM. He worked the 3 to 11 shift. And Ryan had gotten a message from his girlfriend who was visiting her family in Beaumont, Texas. And she said she needed to have him come and pick him up that night. And but he didn't get off until 11. And he wanted me to ride with him to help him drive. And he was like, hey, this will give you time to, some time to go and visit with Barry. And so I was like, yes! The problem with that was, well, Barry's phone was out that month. And so it would have been nice to have given him a courtesy call. But his phone was out that month. And so I was going to have to just, go ahead and help Ryan. And I'll have to spend the night with Barry. Now, when Barry's phone was out, I would go to his, we would have conversations with his, at his job. And as we were doing we talked earlier that day, and he was going to be off for the next 2 days, which meant that I would not have any conversation with him for 2 days. And I was like, so sad. But on that conversation while he was at work that day, I was like, hey, what are you doing for the 2 days off? And he's like, listen, I have no money. So I'm going to have to just stay home and play Sega Genesis. And so I was like, oh, poor baby, I'll talk with you in a couple of days then. So we sign off. That was earlier in the day. And now I'm super excited because I am going to be able to go to Houston that night and surprise Barry. So Ryan gets off work at 11. He's at my house by 11:30. We gas up and we are on the road to Houston at about 11:45 at night. We pull up into Barry's apartment complex, the parking lot complex, at about 2:30. And so Ryan hops behind the seat. He'd been sleeping the whole drive there. And so I drove and I was super excited, had tons of energy. So he gets behind the driver's wheel and I walk up to Barry's apartment. And he lived in a townhome and it's like floor to ceiling windows. And so I could see that there were no lights on in the whole unit. So I thought, oh, okay, he's sleeping. So I walk up to the door and I beat real hard. Bam, 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 bam. And then I lean my ear against the door because I want to hear him come down the stairs. But I don't hear anything. So I'm thinking he must be asleep. So this time I knock harder. Bam, 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 bam. And then I lean my ear against the door. Nothing. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, wait a minute. If he didn't have any money, you know what? He had brothers who lived on the other side of town. They probably called him and saw that his phone was off. And so they needed to, encourage him. They knew he was probably sitting around depressed. So they drove from the north side of Houston to the southwest side where Barry lived. Picked him up. They all went to the nightclub. They were going to show their brother a good time that night. But when I looked at my watch, it was 2:30 and the clubs in Houston closed at 2. So where would they be? Oh, wait. Okay, so then after the club, I figured maybe they went for breakfast because sometimes when when you're leaving the club, you will go and you'll grab something to eat. So I was like, hey, they've gone to get some breakfast and, that would be good for him, continue to fellowship with his brothers. But that could mean that they won't be back at his apartment until about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And Ryan needed to go ahead and continue on into Beaumont. He had about another 60 miles left to drive to get his girlfriend. And so I was like, I cannot be outside, Barry's unit for an hour, an hour and a half in the middle of the night by myself. So I thought, we have a dilemma. But the window right by his front door, one of the levers was undone. And then on the other side, where the lever was fastened, there was a broken window that was being protected by a piece of cardboard. So I thought, okay, I will just push the cardboard over, and reach my hand inside that broken piece of window and unlatch it. And I'll be able to let myself in. And whatever time Barry comes home, it's like, surprise, I'll be there. But as I am pushing the piece of cardboard over, all of a sudden, the door pops open. Out comes Barry, and he is wearing a bathrobe. And he closes the door behind him. And I close my eyes, and then I open them, and I say to him, "You're not alone." And he says, "No, I'm not." And then I asked him, is it a man or a woman? I don't know why I asked that, but he said, it's a woman. I don't know why he answered, but he did. He said, it's a woman. And so then I just say, listen, I have driven with my friend Ryan in the middle of the night. He's going to Beaumont to pick up his girlfriend. He dropped me off here, so that I can spend the night, hang out with you. I can't go to my mama's house at 2:30 in the morning talking about I'm on the streets, dangerous streets of Texas, trying to help my friend out. So I'm gonna just have to spend the night here. And then Barry says, okay, 1 minute. So he goes back in the unit and goes, the stairs. And I walk to the parking lot. And Ryan is, cars is, he's just kind of in holding pattern. He's just waiting for me to come and let him know that I got in. And so he's sitting behind the driver's seat and he's like, well, is he there? And I said, yeah, he's home. I was like, and there's a woman with him. Ryan's eyes get big as saucers. And he says, but what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm spending the night. And I said to him, but I need for you and your girlfriend to get a few hours of sleep and then but hurry back to Houston and pick me up so we can get on back to Austin. And so he's really scared to leave, but I insist Ryan is going to be okay. So cautiously he drives off. I go back to Barry's unit and the door is unlocked. And so I walk in, I walk up the stairs and Barry and the girl are sitting on the edge of the bed. And so I walk up to her and I extend my hand and I say, hey, I'm Lex. I'm Barry's ex-girlfriend. And she shakes my hand. She's like, hi. And I say, listen, I'm going to be spending the night downstairs. I'm going to be sleeping downstairs. And so I grab a pillow and a blanket off the bed, and I walk downstairs, and I make me a bed pallet in the middle of his living room floor. And a couple of minutes later, Barry and the girl, they come down the stairs and they walk out of the unit. 2 minutes later, Barry comes back in, grabs his shoes, and he says, Lex, hey, this is just too much pressure for me. I'm going to just let you have the unit for the night and just close the door when you leave in the morning. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So he leaves. And there I am, sitting in his apartment by myself. Telephone don't work. Grab the remote control for the TV. The cable is out. So I'm sitting there. I think there's like one light on in the kitchen or something, but basically it's dark, and I'm just sleepless. So I'm just kind of sitting there, and I'm like, okay, well, now what? About 20 minutes later, Barry comes back into the apartment complex, back to his unit, and he crosses over the living room and into the dining room where he had his book bag, and he pulls out a binder that has all of his schoolwork in it, riffles through some paper, and then he pulls out this one, this paper, and he says, hey, Lex, here is my English composition paper. Will you proofread it for me and give me your thoughts? And I was like, okay, yeah. And so I read his paper, and I gave him some feedback, and it was a pretty good paper from what I remember. And then after I was done proofreading it, he takes notes, and then I go to sleep. I'm able to go to sleep at that point. And I wake up that morning when I'm hearing a honking horn from the parking lot, and it's Ryan and his girlfriend. So I grab my shoes, my purse, walk out the door, climb into the back seat of Ryan's car. I cry myself all the way back to Austin. The next day, I'm in my apartment, and the phone rings. And I answer the phone, and it's the operator. And the operator says, you have a collect call. Caller, please state your name. And then there's the beep. And the voice on the other line is like, baby, please answer the phone. And then it goes silent. The operator comes back on. Will you accept? And I take a brief breath, close my eyes, and answer, yes. Now, whenever I tell people that story, they always assume that yes was the dumbest decision I could have made. And to everyone who believes that, you are wrong. The for real dumbest decision that I've ever made was 6 weeks later, I married him. Told you. You have no words. But let me go ahead and ruin the ending for you. Everything worked out fine. Not the marriage, just my life. But it is for that reason, for everything that happened in that relationship and beyond, that although I was born Alexus Deneen, I was reborn Alexus Grace, a committed conduit and a grateful recipient. Now you go and do likewise.